Hi, long-haired, don't-care Jake here, and today I'm going to review the gut-bustingly funny novel Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. If you need some good old comic relief, then this book is for you. Gotta be one of the funniest things I've read in a while. Quite literally, I was laughing out loud at some points, but more so than a comedy, it's a satire, which means that there's plenty of irony, sarcasm, and exaggeration of the flaws of people and events, which is the primary fuel for the power of the funnies. Now, from this point, I warn you that I may just review a few ever so minimal spoilers about the plot of the book, but just enough to tell you what the book's about and to convince you whether or not you want to read it. Most of what I review will be discovered in the first chapter anyway, so you've got nothing to worry about. Now, moving on. What is this book about? In the comments section, I want you to tell me what you first thought Catch-22 was the very first time you seen the title and you seen the cover. When I first seen it, I thought it was going to be a super boring book about a game of blackjack. Perhaps that's because of that old game show Catch-21, mingled with one of those books by Orson Scott Card about bridge. But anywho, that assumption was wrong. Very wrong. It's actually a very captivating war story, which takes place during the World War II. It generally follows all of the people within the 256th Flight Squadron, but more so, it focuses on the life of Captain Yossorian, a bombardier, and his comical fear of dying, and his feeble attempts to avoid missions so that he doesn't die. The book starts off with one of these attempts where Yossorian is pretending to have almost, but not quite, symptoms entirely unlike a faulty liver. Later in the book, there are some rather tragic events, which I won't get into detail about, but were a rather stark contrast to the comedy we had come to expect in the book. But nonetheless, Miller does a great job of blending the two together, so that you morbidly laugh at this tragedy while at the same time having great pangs of sorrow. It's very confusing. Anywho, the contrast in this book can be felt within your emotions, as well as the plot. In the end of this book, I think it was a great conclusion to this obtuse story, and it was indeed a rather happy, depending on how you look at it, and it was based off of an unexpected twist, which I loved. I mean, there weren't too many twists in this book, but the ending was one, and I really enjoyed it. As the saying goes, you either absolutely love this book, or you absolutely hate this book. This is perhaps part to its curious format. The book is neither chronological, nor does it consistently follow any one part of the plot or events. Each of the chapters focuses directly on a character. So, with each chapter, you see one of the events from their point of view. The book remains third-person omniscient, it just focuses more so on one character. In addition to that, these stories jump back and forth all over the place. They zigzag and back and forth and cross all over each other, and sometimes are retold, but from a different view. And, brilliantly enough, the plot is still clearly constructed, and the time still feels nice and smooth, despite it being chucked into a blender and just blah, blah, blah. But okay. Miller clearly put a lot of time and consideration into the organization of this book, because I don't think I could have ever imagined such an inconsistent timeline being so clearly and concise to the reader as it was here. In other words, it still feels like one big story, a book, Catch-22. Now, that brings me to Catch-22, the foundation of this book, and another reason for its love-hate relationships with critics. Catch-22 is a comical concept which has become almost a household phrase. I don't think we always realize that it was actually coined by Joseph Miller with the publication of this book. Nor was it always going to be Catch-22. Other ideas were Catch-11, Catch-18, Catch-14, but that's another story. Catch-22. As much as I want to talk about it, I won't, because some of y'all may want to find out on your own, even though it's revealed 50 pages or so in. Okay, finally, there's the repetitive dialogue and eccentrically worded narrative. Quite literally, all of the conversation, which there is much of, by the way, is constructed from the exact same format. It all feels very much alike, and yet it kept me captivated, because it's just so damn funny. But I can see how some people quickly get bored with it. Here's an example of how all the dialogue is constructed, using my own creation. Did you like this book? Well, yes, I like this book. Why did you like it? Because I liked it, that's why. But that's crazy. Why is that crazy? Because it's crazy. That's crazy. What's crazy? That. What is that? Which that do you think? I don't know, that's why I was asking. Then how do you know that that is crazy? And that is for the narration. For a simple, understandable book, if you pay close attention to the narration, he subtly uses a lot of big words. Yet somehow, if you don't look out for them, you don't notice that they're there. It's very strange. For instance, in one chapter I found about 40 words that I did not know, but only after I reread it because I was looking out for them. Words like amorously, vituperation, sardonically, callow, opalescent, hedonistic, roistering, ostentatiously, buxom, mellifluously, ululating. Words like these inconspicuously pop up every other sentence. I mean, Heller's vocabulary is remarkable, and remarkably underestimated at that. I don't know how he does it, but hey, what would you expect with a book such as Catch-22? Well, I guess that's about all. If you want a book chock full of random hilariousness, read this. If you get annoyed by repetition, then this book is most certainly not for you. Before I leave you, I have one other bit of motivation for you to read this classic, however. Currently it is ranked #1 on Goodreads.com as the most started but never finished books ever. Meaning most of those who try to read it, put it down. Which is exactly why you should try to read it all the way through. Something to be proud about. And yes. So, with that, I will read you the first paragraph or so of Catch-22 by Joseph Miller. Preface, I get on with the preface, let's see here. Chapter 1, The Texan. It was love at first sight. The first time Yossarian saw the chaplain, he fell madly in love with him. Yossarian was in the hospital with a pain in his liver that fell just short of being jaundice. The doctors were puzzled by the fact that it wasn't quite jaundice. If it became jaundice, they could treat it. If it didn't become jaundice and went away, then they could discharge him. But this just being short of jaundice all the time confused them. Each morning they came around, 3 brisk and serious men with efficient mouths and inefficient eyes, accompanied by brisk and serious Nurse Duskett, one of the ward nurses who didn't like Yossarian. They read the chart at the foot of the bed and asked impatiently about the pain. They seemed irritated when he told them that it was exactly the same. Still no movement? The full colonel demanded. The doctors exchanged a look when he shook his head. Give him another pill. Nurse Duskett made a note to give Yossarian another pill, and the 4 of them moved along to the next bed. None of the nurses liked Yossarian. Actually, the pain in his liver had gone away, but Yossarian didn't say anything, and the doctors never suspected. They just suspected that he had been moving his bowels and not telling anyone. Yossarian had everything he wanted in the hospital. Alright. The food wasn't too bad, and his meals were brought to him in bed. There were extra rations of fresh meat, and during the hot part of the afternoon, he and the others were served chilled fruit juice or chilled chocolate milk. Apart from... my bad, I've got a cold. Anyway, and during the hot part of the afternoon, he and others were served chilled fruit juice or chilled chocolate milk. Apart from the doctors and the nurses, no one ever disturbed him. For a little while in the morning, he had to censor letters, but he was free after that to spend the rest of each day lying around idly with a clear conscience. He was comfortable in the hospital, and it was easy to stay on because he always ran a temperature of 101. He was even more comfortable than Dunbar, who kept falling down on his face in order to get his meals brought to him in bed. After he made up his mind to spend the rest of the war in the hospital, Yossarian wrote letters to everyone he knew saying he was in the hospital, but never mentioning why. One day he had a better idea. To everyone he knew, he wrote that he was going on a very dangerous mission. They asked for volunteers. It's very dangerous, but someone has to do it. I'll write you the instant I get back. And he had not written anyone since. So, that's that. I mean, you didn't get a too good example of the funniness in here. But that's the first chapter nonetheless. I hope you choose to read this book later on in your life. It's very good. Definitely a classic, which is good to have under your belt. Something fun to talk about. And with that, I'm Jakey Steve. Thank you for watching an LZ Productions, a Jake Steve Productions, a Bibliophile Productions. Have a great day.